Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this bonus content interview session Underdark question mark, where we've been running for a few weeks interviewing each other. They're running in between the main episodes. I am your GM and also your host, Callan, and I'm hosting and talking to and asking questions of and demanding answers of Zimma, who plays Carnelian in the podcast Reflex Save. How you doing tonight, Zimma?
I don't like this demanding answers thing you're going to be doing.
I demand answers. Demand them.
All right.
Well, this is kind of strange because this isn't my car. Generally, when we do these Underdark episodes, we're riding in the car on the way back from a recording session to your house to drop you off. So I feel very strange, and I'm going to ask, hopefully, the editor maybe to add some road noise.
I used to drag here back in high school.
Some pedestrians.
That railroad crossing up there is exactly a quarter mile away from here.
Some traffic beeps.
On green, I'm going for it.
I don't know, something. Just to make me feel comfortable and familiar.
Make a edit in, like, yourself swearing at the average level of drivers in Brisbane.
Oh man, not again. I'll be swearing all the time, that's the problem. Well, in this void of silence, we'll have to just make do and just pretend in our mind's eye that there's some cars going back and forward. So let's get to this episode of Underdark, working title. I'm just going to call it a classic Underdark session, except this time the roles are reversed. Normally, you're asking me questions, but this time I'm going to ask you questions.
So bizarre.
It is. So let's open her up, and I think the best thing to do for these kind of questions are, tell us a little bit about the Zimmer behind the bard. Everyone sort of knows a bit about Carnelian, a little bit, and they get a bit of Zimmer in the podcast. But do they ever really get to ask the tough questions and get the hard-hitting answers? Who is Zimmer? Why is Zimmer? Tell us what you're comfortable with.
Well, I can't really answer the why is Zimmer, but I am currently working full-time in IT, and there was a lot of trials and tribulations to get to this point in my life, but for most of it, I was doing TTRPGs on the side. Is most of it correct? When did I start? Yeah, you're right. That would have been that is the majority of my life.
Just TTRPGs and then work?
Well, no. Obviously, there was a lot of school and then various attempts at university and a lot of work as well. And Warhammer, a lot of Warhammer, a lot of Magic the Gathering.
So all the things that are really expensive.
So many cards. So much.
Do you still have some of your Magic cards?
I do. I have a big box of cards and a big box of miniatures in various states of paintedness.
I think I've got some cards too, but I haven't pulled the box out in a while. I've been meaning to sell them.
Yeah. I need to get around. I think the problem is I need to get around to packing them all up into a presentable box and then just being here, buy the collection.
Yeah, I don't know what's worth what, so it makes it hard to try and work out selling them. They're so weird. Those hobbies are so expensive, but then getting into the resale market of them is also they're worth a lot, but how? Yeah, how do you sell?
There are some places that'll just buy collections wholesale, and they won't even look at what you got. They'll be all right, we'll offer you this much, and we'll just take whatever cards you've got, and they won't worry about the actual value. They're essentially just taking a gamble on being able to resell 10% of it for value later.
Well, is there something that you would like the internet to know specifically that they may not know about you from the podcast?
No, not really.
I don't want the internet to know.
Oh man. Let me think. No, I am pretty open in general. I don't think I'm keeping any like dark secrets here. And if I am, certainly nothing I want the internet, the broader internet, to be aware of.
Zimma, how am I supposed to be a hard-hitting investigative journalist if you don't give me any answers?
Well, you gotta go find people who knew me in the embarrassing before times.
That means I have to go and do like actual work. I don't know if I like that. All right, we'll keep your answer in that. It is a bad idea to give the internet a lot of information about yourself, and people should listen to the podcast to get their dosages of Zimma.
Absolutely. I mean, like, I do. Actually, a lot of what I say is like in the pre-ramble. In the pre-ramble.
Yeah.
So
not all of that gets in.
Not all of that gets in. Yeah. Let me see if I can like just get some tidbits. I like baked goods. Just if you want to trick me, just set a trap with some sweet pastries, and I'll fall for it every time.
Okay, how about if someone were to, let's say hypothetically, some GM or non-GM person were to set a trap for you with a baked good or sweet pastry, which one would be the most effective?
Ooh, an apple turnover.
Apple turnover. Let me just don't worry about what I'm doing. It's okay. I'm just typing away at the questions I've got to answer. How do you spell turn? There we go. Okay.
Callan, you're the GM. I'm in a constant state of worry about what you're doing.
That means I'm doing my job right. So, how about we turn to the podcast a little bit? So, you play Carnelian on the hit podcast Reflex Save, right? Am I hearing that right?
That is correct, Callan.
And so, what was your inspiration to play Carnelian or a bard, or did Carnelian come first, or did the bard come first, and you work backwards from there? What was your inspiration?
Well, the choice of bard was mostly because it was just not something that I'd played a lot of in 5th edition before. I think I'd only really done like a one shot as a bard before, and I wanted to get into it and give it a proper college try.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I play a lot of like primary casters, but usually I lean more towards wizards and sorcerers than bards.
Yeah, I knew that you were a big fan of wizards and sorcerers, but I would have thought bard would have been right in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, you'd think so, but I think they just have, like, in 5th edition especially, they have a lot more overlap with wizard and sorcerer than they do in other editions, just because they don't, like, they get, like, a little bit of rogue skills, but they don't, unlike previously, they're primary spellcasters now. So they lose a little bit of like the unique flavor and the unique mechanics that they had before, which was revolved a lot around like music and playing songs. And in exchange for that, they now scale like most other spellcasters do.
Yeah, bards in older editions of D&D were more buffers. Like they would be. Apart from being sort of big knowledge characters as well, they would just basically keep party buffs up and like sort of help keep statuses as well off your party. Like they were just really good general stat boosters, like assist characters.
They had songs that they could sing. They were good at. They're obviously geared towards being like face characters. They also, even as far back as like the 2nd edition, they got access to some rogue abilities, but not as good as that's always been like the bardic way of doing things. Is you've always been able to fight, but not as good as a fighter. You can cast spells, but not as good as a wizard. You can sneak, but not as good as a rogue.
Right.
But what they do have that's unique is a lot of these abilities that make the party function better, and also geared towards using their charisma stat as a primary, using charisma as their primary stat, which means they can be diplomatic.
So they sort of change how your party composition is.
Yeah.
So you decided on the bard first and then the character. So what drew you to making Carnelian himself?
What drew me to Carnelian specifically is I like kobolds. They are probably one of my favorite things from D&D. They have an interesting sort of history and trajectory in that they kind of started out as just generic mooks because someone decided that just killing goblins over and over again was getting a bit dull.
Right. So get some more mooks in there, but just different mooks. Yeah, they've really as well by making goblins and kobolds and a few other monster races sort of into player races now. It's sort of, I always felt that it changed the dynamic of, and I don't know, we talk a little bit, pre-campaign about sort of what you wanted from the character, and then sort of let that evolve as we go through. But I always felt that I like to lean in on that monster races are seen as monster races even in Faerun, and so I've done this a few times, and I think I've tried to potentially make you feel guilty about it, but really lean into the fact that a lot of other races are expecting Carnelian to really side with them when he does. His objective is more broad in the sense of being kind of like an ambassador for kobolds and for small races and for monster races. But I always felt like leaning into that was the most interesting part of a kobold or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. And it definitely is nice having the differences being highlighted there when playing a more monstrous race, especially in a setting like Icewind Dale where everybody's a bit shifty and cagey compared to, somewhere like Waterdeep or Baldur's Gate.
They're a bit more isolated and, what would you say? They're just sort of more insular, right? Because all the different 10 towns are very much they're part of a bigger area, but they're all their own town and they're all sort of their own people, especially Duggan's Hole.
Well, that's the one that's just outright xenophobic, so...
I don't even know if I was playing it that way. I remember reading in the book about how they are compared to everyone else, and I think maybe I put a bit of too much of that information, I think maybe to Jen, about them being like that, and it just grew before you guys even got there. This hillbilly town that anyone who would visit is just hills have eyes sort of. And I think that I had to lean into it at that point. But yeah, man, there's been a few instances where the other one I can think of is now I'm forgetting her. The wizard that you have right now in the party. Sorry, it's been a few weeks since we recorded, actually.
I know who you're talking about. Our necromancer friend who has copped a bit of flack for not doing a lot.
Well, Valine, that's it. I was blanking on the name. But yeah, you guys are you guys don't do anything. And it's this person is sort of a researcher and all that kind of stuff. They're not a battle character. You guys are shitting on her all the time.
She is a necromancer, and she's helping us, which we appreciate. Yeah. But I don't know. I think it's a bit of it's just in good fun.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be more diplomatic than the others.
Everyone else.
Yeah.
Oh man.
There have been
every time Andrew asks, "Oh, do you have this spell?" knowing full well that I wouldn't have it on the character, and I'm just like, "Man, come on, give me a break."
I think she did well in that last fight we had.
I didn't want to use Blight as heavily as I think this one will come out. Well, actually, this next episode coming out will be the next part of that fight. So maybe I shouldn't try and go into spoiler territory, but I didn't want to and this is the thing with DMs, right? If you give an NPC to characters, you don't want to overtake them in terms of like combat prowess or like cool things they can do, because that's the player's domain. But I also don't want it to be totally useless, because otherwise people, they'll go that way. So it's hard. And also the stat blocks you have, it's not like I built a wizard and gave her a wizard, character sheet. It's like a stat block, a monster stat block essentially. So they're very limited compared to players.
Yeah, no, the NPC stat blocks. I know a lot of games have been leaning more into NPC stat blocks, and for good reason as well. Player character sheets are complex. Being able to condense that as much as possible makes the GM's life very easy.
Yeah, making the GM's life easy is probably the best thing you can do.
Yeah, well, it is a collaborative game, but the GM inevitably is the one putting the most work in, because they gotta
prep everything.
Yeah, and then improvise when all that prep goes to waste.
Which is 100% of the time, yeah. Oh my god. All right, well, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift focus a little bit. I'm going to do a segment that was coined in the very first interview by Andy, and I'm actually going to do 2 rounds of this. They're lightning rounds. So I'm going to do a few rapid-fire questions, and I'll get you to answer based on just whatever your first impulse is. I'm going to do 2 rounds of this. I'm going to warn you, the first one's going to be really easy. The second one's going to get a bit more complex. So just prepare yourself.
Yeah.
Ready to go?
I am prepared.
Okay. Favorite color?
Blue.
Favorite Ninja Turtle?
Michelangelo.
Whiskey or beer?
Whiskey.
Night or day?
Night?
Intel or AMD?
Neither.
Sun or moon?
Moon.
You took way too long to think of sun or moon. Compared to
Look, I had to take a second to process what the question was. I almost had to get you to say it again.
What about the Intel or AMD one? Oh, no answers to that one. Okay, I'll write that one down as well.
I think in general, I would these days get AMD, but that's just because of the lower price point compared to Intel. And realistically, I dislike both manufacturers for different reasons. But
damn, well, I guess we'll count out that sponsorship for this week. Sorry, Intel. Maybe next time. Okay, we'll go back to some more longer form questions. I do have another lightning round, and that one was easy compared to my second lightning round. Potentially. We'll find out.
Potentially.
So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to mix in some questions that we would normally do on Underdark, like the card journey. So yeah. We'll see how this sort of turns out. So I got this question that I thought would be interesting, and I know that you and I have had a number of conversations on Underdark about 5th edition, Pathfinder, some other different editions, and maybe what, D&D could learn about extending and flexing its system. Like we both have agreed that we love D&D in the sense that, it brought us into tabletop RPGs. 5th edition brought a lot more people to playing the hobby, which I think is always great. But it's not been without its challenges, particularly recently. And we've talked about some of the limitations on a much more simplistic system compared to a few other TTRPGs. Blah, blah, blah. So this question is geared towards that. If you could make one change to the D&D 5th edition game, like mechanic-wise or anything similar to that, what would it be?
Replace D20s with 2D10s.
Ooh.
Now, it's blasphemy, and
that is actually blasphemy, and I can feel people...
I do love the look of a D20. It is a very cool shape, and it's iconic. Like, realistically, you could never do this. But the change to the math would benefit the way 5th edition is designed.
So that's interesting. I know there's a number of mechanics we've talked about having problems with. So the biggest problem, the biggest shift you would see, or the best change would be to do 2d10 rather than a d20. Which, by the way, I can hear people going towards your house right now to complain.
And this is why I tell
that
people
it is
nothing
blasphemy.
about me.
So 2d10 though.
Yeah, so it has a you are less likely to roll a crit. You're also less likely to roll a critical failure, and it has a standard deviation of probability, or standard deviational curve. It's been a long time since I've done actual probability and statistics, but essentially the numbers in the middle of the range crop up more often, and the numbers on the end of the range crop up less likely. Now, crits are a feel-good moment, crit fails are a feel-bad moment, but have potential for storytelling. So you want both of them to exist, but I think if you make them happen less often, then you can give them more impact, and then by dragging the dice into the middle, you can say that you as the GM especially can be like, all right, I can expect this to happen. I can expect this outcome more often than not, and you can better plan around it.
Okay. So you would prefer to make the average roll more median, and therefore, like, because you've got we've talked about bounded accuracy before in the D20 system, so that it's like smaller variations up or down will hit or miss those creatures, like trying not to. I guess it's also a way that, like, a lot of monster AC, for example, or saves are pretty terrible unless they specifically go out to make that a key part of the monster. So I guess if you make players slightly less likely, like more in the medium range, you can play around with those numbers more.
Yeah, and like at median values, most players are likely to hit, and players who have good AC are actually like it puts a lot of value on what your specialty is. Because if you have a high AC, because you've specialized as a tank, that actually means that you have better than average chances of not being hit by your average monster. Same goes for your attack. If you're good at attacking, you have better than a 50-50 to land your attack.
Okay. All right. So, and then same goes for things like spell saves and spell to hit.
Yeah, exactly. You do take away a little bit of variance, but it's not like this isn't like a massive change in probability. Like, just
it's a small tweak.
It is a small tweak.
Before.
Yeah, and I feel like though it is a change because again of the bounded accuracy, which like the entirety of 5th edition seems to be built around, having that more constrained probability would be like a benefit.
Okay, interesting. Because and look, if anyone's interested, I think we've got a number of those Underdark episodes. We've actually got a few that are recorded but not uploaded yet, if I remember correctly, throughout the cast. But we talk about a lot of this kind of stuff. So compared to the other interviews, because we get this opportunity to go a little bit more deep into mechanics, which some may or may not like. Check out some of those Underdark episodes if you want to hear us go on and on about mechanics in different TTRPGs, or some inside information on the campaign that we're playing, which is the Rime of the Frostmaiden campaign for the pod. All right. Well, I'm going to move to another podcast question. So that was my question. That was an Underdark question. Let's move back to a podcast question. So in the podcast, and now bear in mind, the part we're up to in the releasing just before this interview was you just hit the eddies. You just gotten to the eddies. That fight is going on. So think about, try not to put spoilers in. I almost did earlier. In the podcast, is there a current mystery that you would like to see resolved, and do you have any theories about it?
I don't know if it's so much a mystery. I think like because I remember when we got the thing that changed the weather, and it changed the weather for a little bit, and then the cold light walkers attacked us.
Yep.
I remember thinking that, oh, that's not actually like it's just someone's just controlling the weather, and we recently had that confirmed for us that Oriel is every night when the aurora occurs, that's her going out and expending a good deal of magic to blanket the Dale in perpetual dusk.
Perpetual dawn, perpetual dusk, yes.
So I guess like the only real mystery left there is like why she's gonna bother.
Okay.
And I guess also to another degree is like it's a bit more meta, but like I'm curious like what the justification for other gods not getting more directly involved is. Because the divine, like having read a lot of the Forgotten Realms and played a lot in the Forgotten Realms, direct divine intervention is typically frowned upon in the setting, and usually goes poorly for the god that is responsible. Yeah,
I mean, you rarely see gods directly talking to people in D&D. I mean, I think we're at that point as well where we ran into an angel or an avatar of Kalemvor, and very specifically I chose not to have Kalemvor himself appear because I think that kind of direct intervention sort of doesn't work with the setting unless you're a patron. Patrons are a little bit different for warlocks. That's why one of my distinctions for them, they turn up all the time.
Patrons are usually a little bit under being a god, though. Like, I mean, you can have a patron who is a god, like Asmodeus is a very classic example.
Yeah.
But actually, because of Baldur's Gate 3, we've seen that a lot of like the devils don't, the archdevils don't do a lot of patronage themselves. They usually let their underlings like middle manage the warlocks.
The middle management. Oh man, that moment when and I don't want to spoil that game, but like when a patron appears for a character, it's just, could you imagine instead of the way that person, like that patron appears and looks, if they were just sort of a dumpy tiefling in a suit with a clipboard and glasses? I just, all right, well, you didn't fulfill this part of the agreement, so unfortunately I'm going to have to, just that kind.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I should do a warlock whose patron they've got into is just a really boring like middle management at an accounting firm style demon. And just all their powers are based around just weird math or accounting tricks or something like that.
You could do that and have it just be like it's a trick, right? Like the devil is just presenting as like a frumpy and boring to like lead people into a false sense of security and make people think that they're not a threat.
I almost think it's funnier though that they are like that. Like you're their first person that actually agreed. They keep going up to people and it's like, okay, I've got this deal for you. If you sign on this contract, I'll be able to give you some power based on. And then just everyone's like, no, you're too boring. And just one person said yes, and so they're putting their entire micromanagement style into that one warlock out there. All right. I'm going to do another couple questions and go into lightning round and then sort of get into our last question. So what's been your favorite part about performing in the podcast so far?
Oh, I think there have been a couple of moments that I think were just excellent to be a part of the group for. There have been a couple of like in-character moments, like the islands just before we got to Oriel's lair. The like everything to do with Angajuk and like traveling under the sea has been like definitely been one of the highlights of this adventure. I know you did.
Oh, really?
I know you added a little extra to it, so it maybe not be like representative of what it is like in the actual adventure path, but I really enjoyed the Under the Sea section and like camping on the islands in between.
I will say a little is very much in heavy air quotes. There was not a lot for me to go on, so I wrote a lot of that myself.
You've done a good job then.
All right, thank you.
And the other major highlight for me is definitely the Durgar Stronghold, Sunblight Keep. Immediately followed by us fucking demolishing that dragon.
Man, I was worried about the Sunblight Keep getting a bit too bogged down, but I think you guys did a really good job of keeping everything moving pretty quickly. As in, like, you know, part of the GM's job is to keep things moving quickly, but it also relies on the players helping you with that. And I think you guys did a really good job keeping in mind that you had a time limit and you had, constraints, and you weren't wanting to rest all the time, which could get really sort of ugly. So I think you guys did a really good job of keeping that section moving. And then you get the reward of completely demolishing a dragon, which you could have gone for first as well.
I feel like that would have been a mistake. I think we did it the right way around, and it paid off because we got a great dungeon crawl section, and then we got a great capstone of getting to fight that the mechanical dragon.
Right, so Sunblight and the Younger Jook stuff. So for anyone that is way behind, you got a lot to look forward to. For anyone else that's up to more recent stuff, you'll hopefully have also enjoyed the Younger Jook stuff as well. All right, Zimma, I gotta hand it to you now. This is the second lightning round, and as I said, you have to be warned. This one gets a bit more difficult.
All right,
I still want knee-jerk reactions, but you might get some weirdness thrown in. But you have to think for a sec.
Okay.
All right, let's go. Favorite comic or comic book character?
Dream of the Endless and Sandman.
Okay. Favorite TTRPG mechanic?
Ooh. Fate. I think Fate points. Specifically,
from what system?
I mean, the first time I was introduced to them, it was in the 40k and Warhammer Fantasy tabletop systems, the Fantasy Flight ones. But I think that idea in those games was strong enough that other games have, been stealing it, and rightfully so.
All right. Favorite 80s cartoon?
80s?
Yep.
He-Man.
He-Man, okay. Favorite TTRPG?
It's got to be Exalted.
Oh, okay, interesting.
I don't get to play it a lot, but it's got a special. But it's I've got a soft spot for it.
Fair enough. Favorite video game or video game series? Told you these ones were harder.
Series, it's probably got to be Metroid. Individual game, though, I probably got to give it to Planescape Torment.
That's interesting.
I hesitate for a second there because there's a newer one which might take the cake. Because Disco Elysium is fucking fantastic.
All right. Right. Well, that actually might lead into another question later. But final lightning round question. Favorite podcast?
Look, there is a very obvious answer here, but I'm not going to go for the low-hanging fruit. I actually got to shout out Castle Super Beast, which is a very long-running video game and news podcast that I've been listening to for a long time now. They usually release weekly, and it's always entertaining to listen to.
That was a trick question. You were supposed to say reflex save, and we're going to have to cut that interview right here. No.
I don't care. I saw the trick.
Well, give those ones a listen if that interests you. What was that one again?
Castle Super Beast.
Castle Super Beast.
You can find it where you find all your good, high-quality podcasts, like Reflex Save.
Nice save. I might try and see if I can find a link in the show notes to give them a link, so that might be okay. So keep an eye on the show notes. All right, that was the second lightning round. I told you it got more difficult. There were some questions that were not so easy to answer.
It certainly was required a little bit more thinking, yes.
All right. Then I've got a couple questions I do want to lead out to, but we are going to run out of time, though. I wanted to touch on something you just said for the last one, which was favorite video game, specifically. I think you said Planescape Torment as well. So do you have like a favorite D&D to video game adaptation? And bear in mind, it is okay to say Baldur's Gate, because that has been fucking amazing recently. But you might have another one that's favorite.
So I actually have a few. I've played quite a few D&D adaptations. Baldur's Gate 3 has obviously been phenomenal, and it breathed a bit of interest back into D&D after Wizards of the Coast fucking around. Game is great. Go play it if you haven't already.
Yeah, 100% support that statement. Go play Baldur's Gate. It's great.
Planescape Torment is an old classic favorite of mine. It's D&D as well, but it's second edition.
Second edition? Yeah, it is.
So it's a D&D second edition specifically. It uses the Planescape setting. So Planescape would be familiar to people in that it sort of became the Great Wheel cosmology that D&D has just adopted now as the standard, but in particular it's set in the city of Sigil, which is in the quote center of the multiverse. Not really, but it is a fantastical setting full of all of the weird parts of D&D. Like, all of the weird parts of D&D kind of mesh together, because Sigil is the city of doors, and because all the doors in it can just open up to different planes in the multiverse, so it's constantly being visited by celestials and fiends and genies and like Mondorons from Mechanus and the Gith from where, the astral plane, and it's full of just all kinds of, and it's also like, because it's like extraplanar, it deals with a lot of like metaphysics stuff, a lot of like faith, and like how faith in the D&D universe makes things makes things real,
which is a very Pratchett approach, which I really appreciate.
Yeah. There is a third place answer there as well. It's a bit more it's a bit more janky, but I love Neverwinter Nights 2 specifically.
I was gonna say 2, okay.
The expansion pack for 2, Mask of the Betrayer, is one of my favorite D&D stories. It's a little harder to recommend because Neverwinter Nights 2 is a bit more jank than either the Infinity Engine games or Baldur's Gate 3. And also it's an epic level sequel to the base campaign for Neverwinter Nights 2. So if you never played the base campaign for Neverwinter Nights 2, you're going to be lost a little bit.
Yeah.
And also it is an epic level game. It does run to level 30.
I can't imagine programming that in. Holy crap. I think that Baldur's Gate did a really smart thing of like capping the level at like 12 or something like that.
Yeah,
it was like not going into that super high play.
I'd like to see like an expansion for Baldur's Gate 3 where we do get to those super high levels. Maybe
stopping short of 20th level. I just think that it's hard to not put Wish in the game, like as a player ability, but having like you can't not have it. Like, yeah.
You can program Wish into the game. You just gotta like make it not have that function. That's function that says you can do whatever you want. You gotta limit it to being like, this can be any other spell in the game, or it can give you a bunch of money, or it can give it like modes that you can select, and that way it's actually programmable.
All right, I'm gonna go. This is gonna be a real quick one, but it's thematic. I wanted to ask you, when this campaign finishes eventually, whether that's going to be soon after we come back or whether that's going to be a bit longer, what would you like to do next? And that mostly is going to say, like, with the podcast, like with us, is there a thing that you would like to do as a project, or is it maybe even outside of us? Maybe you want to move on to something different. Is there something you want to do next, or is there something you just don't want to do anything else? Or
well, I'm gonna keep playing D&D, or maybe if not D&D, then something else, whether that be Pathfinder or Exalted or some other old system that I love, like Rogue Trader, or like, one of the Warhammer ones. And yeah, if that involves doing it with the rest of you, then I am all for that.
It's like recording, yeah, okay. Interesting. All right. Well, look, I think we actually do need to wrap up there. We're going to go a bit over time otherwise. Thank you for coming to this, I'm going to say, classic Underdark episode, because I'm going to assume that in the background the whole time has been the sound drone of a car engine throughout this entire interview. And I just have one thing to say to you, Zimma, to end off this episode.
I'm not in your car. You can't.
Zimma, get the fuck out of my car.
Have a good one, Callan.
Catch you later.